It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
Brothers, sisters, working class heroes, this is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. On Saturday, Donald Trump nominated Amy Coney Barrett as his choice to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. And I got to tell you, the best line that I've heard thus far was that Ginsburg had opened up all of the doors that Amy Barrett is going to walk through, and Barrett's going to close them behind her. I got to tell you, that's probably the best way I've heard what's coming. Now, look, we can debate whether that's true or not. That down the line. The reality is things are going to change, and things are going to change in a big, big way. And the weird point is we're in this interesting moment where you've got the hypocrisy of the Republicans who, back in 2016 were, no, we can't possibly. And this was, again, back in January, February, March, can't possibly have a hearing over a Supreme Court justice in an election year. The people must decide. Now, we're literally days away from the election, and the Republicans are saying, no, we've got the power. This is very much a power grab. This is very much we won, you lost, get over it. And the question becomes, does this become a moment where Democrats find a spine and do the same thing down the road? We'll find out. But what we do know is that right now we're looking at some pretty big changes. We're looking at massive changes in our society and a right-wing nosedive. Whether it's going to be on healthcare, because we know the healthcare decision that's coming up in November, the hearing in November, which this justice will sit on, could upend healthcare in this country for the next decade and undo the ACA, ripping millions of people off the rolls and upsetting everything else. And let's not forget the massive tax break for our wealthy, so that, again, they can use it for their purposes, which is gaining more power. Let's forget about women's rights. I think abortion is going to be completely off the table, reverting back to the states, and then we'll see that fun game being played out. Obviously, civil rights we're going to see that walked backwards. Affirmative action gone. No chance of a voting rights kind of legislation, all gone. The LGBTQ community. We're going to go back, as I've been saying, look, we're going to head back to the good old days where the right wing has imagined that, we kept women barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. We kept minorities in the fields picking cotton, and we kept the gays in the closet. That's the America that they want. And oh, by the way, you're going to see workers' rights take a major hit as we're going to enter the new Lochner era, or maybe we're going to call it the Barrett era, because we're going to see the pendulum of power once again swing even further to the side of moneyed interest into the employer class. We've been seeing that happening for the last couple of decades as the pendulum has been swinging. This administration, like none other, the pendulum has been swinging way far to the powered and the moneyed and the employer class. So our billionaires, our CEO class, they're going to do wildly well. Their power will be outweighed, and understand, when they control government, they get what they want. And I go back to something my high school government teacher said. He said, look, government is about who gets what. If you control the powers of government, if you control the levers of policy, you control the distribution of things. The wealthy understand this. They understand it much better than we do. We're still fighting over nonsensical things that don't affect our lives, whether two people in another state or another town or another house can get married, whether a woman has a right to control her own destiny and her own body. We're still fighting over that stuff, while the wealthy are going, well, you keep fighting over that. We're going to cash in. Thank you very much. And I'll tell you, that came out this week with the tax returns. Somebody leaked 15 years of Donald Trump's tax returns. And what did we find out? Well, we found out what we already knew. The rich get away without paying their fair share of taxes. And we, the working class of the country, happily pick up the tab, which is why we have such happy citizens. Why the Tea Party was so thrilled to be taxed enough. We found out, and this is again, not surprising. Now understand, for the last couple of years, people would say, we want to see the tax returns because a lot of it was pumped up as the smoking gun is going to be there. We're going to find the smoking gun to his money in Russia or some nefarious deals. And I've been saying for no, it's not about that. He's been hiding the tax returns for a couple of reasons. One, he's not as rich as he says he is, and he doesn't want you to know that he's not that rich. But two, and this is the same reason that Mitt Romney, was a little hesitant. This is the same reason that you saw a lot of the wealth class being a little hesitant. They don't want you to know. They don't want you to know how badly the rigged game is. They don't want you to know how much they're benefiting off of the tax system that they've created. Now understand, from 2000 to 2017, Donald Trump has paid $1,500 in taxes. Let that sink in for a minute. Now, on social media, there are a bunch of people posting memes about, hey, I paid my taxes and I paid more than Donald Trump. And in fact, the Biden camp has a great ad where they've got teachers and plumbers and truck drivers and, all down the list of people, they paid their taxes, tens of thousands of dollars. Yet Donald Trump walks away with $750 2 years. And look, that's why he didn't want you to see the tax returns. That's why the wealthy don't want you to see this. And, look, the reality is it's not just Donald Trump. And I personally don't think he did anything overly illegal. I'm sure there might be some moments where, he did bloat his deductions a bit. He did pursue deductions that he really wasn't qualified for. And there's been a bunch of those stories over the years, especially the housing credit that he got in New York that was supposed to be for low-income people that he pocketed. What we found out is, like I said, over that period of time, 2000 to 2017, he paid about $1,500 in taxes. 10 years, he paid absolutely nothing. He got refunds in other years. And what we also find out is that he owes a ton of money, in excess of $400 million in personal guaranteed loans. And those personal guaranteed loans are coming due when? Well, over the next couple of years. Now, the question is who does he owe it to? We don't know that because, well, we never really got to vet any of that stuff. And one of the arguments is that this is a national security risk. People have been saying, and I've been one of them, saying that, if he's indebted to someone and they're hiding his secret, this is one of those ways that you get blackmailed. This isn't just about Donald Trump. This is about any president. It's the reason you go through a vetting process. But the fact that he owes so much money, you start to then let the wheels start to turn and you go, it's no wonder we're seeing a lot of the shady operations that are going on. It's no wonder that there's so many emolument clause violations. It's no wonder that you start looking at things a little differently, and then you got to start asking the question. The people that he's kowtowing to, does he owe them? And I'll tell you, that's not a good place to be in. We also find out that he's been fighting for over a decade with the IRS. Evidently, he claimed massive losses in a year and was given a tax refund of like $73 million. And the IRS wants it back. And they're fighting to claw that money back because, like a lot of things, you got to wonder how aggressively they pursued tax breaks that maybe they weren't qualified for. For instance, the one that's been getting a lot of play. $70,000 to get haircuts? And for that thing on his head? 70 grand that you write off for that? I got to tell you, I think he got ripped off. Just saying, got ripped off. But that's it. That's a tax write-off. And the thing is this is what rich people have been getting away with for a very long time. They use their business accounts to pay for personal things. I've talked to people in the past, and I know people who they don't own anything. The business owns it all. Their home, the business owns it. Their cars, the business owns it. The kids' cars, the grandkids' cars, the business owns it. They hand out gas cards to all of the family through the business account. And all of their living expenses get written off so that they don't have to pay taxes on it. And these are, perfectly sort of okay. And this is what I was saying from the beginning. The reason I wanted the tax returns vetted, and it wasn't just about Donald Trump. It's the indictment of the entire wealth class of this country and the things that they've been able to get away with that the rest of us don't. The rest of us, because we haven't started our own little LLCs and haven't figured out how to hire a really high-priced tax avoidance attorney to make sure that we stay out of jail when we take deductions that probably we shouldn't have. But, we're wealthy enough to, when you're in the strata that Donald Trump claims to be in and that our 1% is, you can really tie things up. You can fight with the government. You can fight to make sure you don't go to jail for a long time. And then you can negotiate yourself down a much, much easier settlement. And this is what the wealthy have been getting away with, for a long time. This is not new. It's not news. It's exactly what it's always been. And for me, his tax returns once again highlight the fact that average everyday working stiffs like you and me, we go to work every day. We drive the trucks, we pound the nails, we take care of the kids, we wipe seniors' behinds, we do all of the things that need to be done, and we pay a higher tax rate than our billionaire class. When Amazon pays nothing, I guess Donald Trump's got that over Amazon. He paid $750. Amazon paid nothing. I could go through a list of companies that we actually paid to exist in this country. We paid them more than they made money off of us. That's how screwed up the system actually is. And you go, well, how is that possible? Well, it's possible because thanks to Donald Trump's 2017 tax heist, we've created an environment where corporate taxes are lower, where the capital gains taxes are lower, and the top marginal tax rate is lower, while, the average everyday working stiff still pays a sizable chunk of their income in taxes without all of the loopholes and the write-offs. Because one of the things, and I love to point this out to my union brothers and sisters, one of the things that Trump took away is in the old days, you used to be able to deduct your union dues. You used to be able to deduct work clubs. You used to be able to deduct a lot of things that were pertinent to your job. They did away with all that. So no more of that, because that benefited, working staff if you itemized. They didn't quite go after all the other stuff. And what was the first thing that they wanted to do during the coronavirus? Yeah, the one thing they took from corporate America, the 3 martini lunches and all of the entertainment money that they were able to write off, they wanted to give it back. And I love that. It was one of my favorite things. I love the fact that their first suggestion is, to get restaurants going again, we should let corporate America, break out the expense account and let the taxpayer fund their drinking and nights at the strip club. But that's who these folks are. And it's what they've been getting away with. The fact of the matter is, right from the way things are written, people who work for a living, if you do really well working and collecting a paycheck, chances are you're going to pay a higher rate than the guy who the hardest day's labor he's ever done is shift money from one pocket to the other. Because capital gains is taxed at a maximum of 20%. They want to take it down to 15% because, hey, we need gamblers in our society. We need Wall Street fat and happy. Top marginal tax rate for someone making $1 million a year, 37%. Now, understand, when we had a good socialist president like Dwight David Eisenhower, a good socialist Republican like Eisenhower, that top marginal tax rate back in 1953 was 92%. Now think about that. Back during the socialist era of Eisenhower, 92%. Good capitalist Donald Trump, 37%. Difference is, during the Eisenhower era, we built an interstate highway system that we still use today. We invested heavily in the country, and we paid for our wars. Yep, still had our wars because we love war, but we paid for them. Didn't have massive debt, didn't have trillion-dollar deficits every year, didn't saddle our great-great-grandchildren with more and more and more, actually paid our bills. Why? Because we taxed the wealthy. We taxed them at a rate that they were still wealthy. Trust me, they were still wealthy. They just weren't the kind of obscene, obnoxious wealth that we see today. That's the problem. And I'll tell you, the more I look at what's going on, the more I keep saying we need a tax revolution in this country. And will Trump's tax returns be part of that? I don't know. Should we be angry, every one of us, that Trump gave his daughter a gig, evidently wrote off $750,000 for consulting fees for the daughter, when most of us can't even fund our kids' college funds? Should we be upset about that? So look, I never thought there was going to be a smoking gun. I never thought that this was going to get him. No. I wanted to get the whole wealth class of this country. I want to wake working people up to going, you are getting screwed. I agree with the T-twits. We are taxed enough already, and they're not. For me, it's that simple. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break, right back after this. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1910. That was the day the Protocol of Peace brought an end to the cloakmakers' strike in New York City. The garment industry had been rocked by the uprising of 20,000 months earlier. Young women had struck hundreds of small shops over pay, recognition, and working conditions. They won ILGWU recognition in all but a handful of shops. 60,000 cloakmakers in the city were inspired to walk out of the sweatshops that July. The mostly male strike force demanded shorter hours and increased pay, the closed shop, and more. Union membership soared, and most of the small shops caved. The larger manufacturers would not, however, and by the end of the summer, the Protocol of Peace was negotiated. Future Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis figured prominently in the negotiations. The protocol established higher wages, shorter hours, and overtime pay. It also guaranteed the union shop, elimination of contracting, and monitoring of piecework rates. Even more significant, workers won a union health center, a board of sanitary control, a board of grievances, and a board of arbitration. For the first time, garment workers had access to health care, a way to eliminate sweatshop conditions, and a way to mediate and resolve shop floor complaints. The price to be paid, however, was that workers would give up their most powerful leveraging tool, the right to strike. The agreement was lauded as a step forward for industrial democracy. But soon, many workers complained that the protocol failed to answer a number of shop floor issues. Grievances piled up, and workers were penalized when they attempted to strike to resolve their problems. The protocol would be scrapped for a return to militant strikes during the 1920s. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So we're really living in quite interesting times. As the 2020 is the first time in the national Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare's existence. And they've been around since 1982. This is the first time that they've made a presidential endorsement in their entire history. And I got to tell you, this is one of those moments that kind of make you go, this is a different election. And for me, this is one of those things, because this has always been an organization. They're about protecting Social Security and Medicare. And those two things have always been kind of the third rail of politics. And here to share some of the reasons why they chose to make this endorsement, I've asked Dan Adcock to come talk with us. Dan is the Director of Government Relations and Policy there at the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Dan, thanks for taking time for us. So you there? Dan, how are you? I don't think Dan can hear me. See if we can get Dan on the phone. We'll go that route instead. Dan, can you hear me? Dan? No, that ain't happening. We must have missed him. Going to be a fun day. But this is one of those moments where you look at the sad reality of where we are as a country, and the fact that Social Security has been one of those things that hasn't really been on the table, so to speak, and yet here we are
on a radio moment. Show.
There he is. Dan, how are you?
Come on in.
Just hand him the phone. This is what happens when you do live radio. You get into one of these moments where I can hear him just fine, but he's clearly not hearing me. And it's been Dan. How are you today?
Oh, good.
Evidently, you can't hear me.
Right, because you're on mute.
Okay.
But we can do it this way. That's fine.
So, as I started off, this is the first time you guys have made an endorsement. I'm curious, what was the reason?
Well, I just think the stakes are so high in this election that it's not an understatement to say that this is the most important election. But I think one of the things that was the straw that broke the camel's back, but amongst other concerns about how the current president will treat seniors, is this proposal that for the first to allow for payroll taxes that are the dedicated revenue source for Social Security to be deferred, but then also the president saying at least 5 times since August that he would want to totally eliminate payroll taxes. And the chief actuary of the Social Security Administration estimates that if he were to do that without reimbursing the Social Security Trust Fund, that would mean that Social Security would run out of money starting in the middle of 2023 and no longer to be able to pay any benefits whatsoever.
Now that's a huge departure from the situation where we're at right now, which is there's some talk of maybe not paying full benefits down the road, but still paying something for the next 7,500 years. You're talking about ending it completely, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, if Congress does nothing between now and 2035, according to the latest Social Security trustees report, then the trust fund itself runs out of money, but tax revenue still would come in that would cover 79% of benefits. But obviously, we don't want to do that. In the past, when this has happened, Congress has stepped in at least at the last minute in 1983 to extend
the trust fund, and we hope that they would in the forms of legislation like Congressman John Larson from Connecticut has introduced that would extend the trust fund by more than 75 years by finally making wealthy people pay their fair share into Social Security and then have enough money left over for to pay for some benefit improvements. And Vice President Biden essentially would do the same thing with his Social Security plan. Yeah,
I mean, and with the release of Trump's tax returns, or the leak of Trump's tax returns, I think it highlights a lot of the situation that we're in. When someone like Trump pays over a 17-year period, like $1,500. I mean, it shows just how bad the whole system has swung to one side.
Right. Well, and especially you look again at President Trump's tax law that passed back in December of 2017 that was mainly benefited people like him, like the wealthy and multinational corporations. That blew a $1.9 trillion hole in the budget deficit and not long after it passed it, several notable Republicans, people like Marco Rubio and also Senate Majority Leader McConnell, said, well, then the next step is we got to go cut Social Security and Medicare. But because essentially it was so essentially it's a scheme for this huge redistribution of income from middle class and working class people, the benefits they get from Social Security to pay for tax cuts for the rich.
So, but here's the thing, when we talk about this, and we know this to be the direction that they're going, because they've told us, they're very honest about this. You have to give them credit on one thing.
Right.
This is something Trump has been honest about, something Mitch McConnell has talked about for a long time, yet their supporters seem to be the people who would be most adversely affected by this. Look, for the longest time, they were saying, we're just going to go after Social Security for the younger people, for those people 55 and under. They'll have plenty of time to catch up. You're going to be okay. Don't worry about it. This is saying, no, screw you, Granny. You got 2 years. Back to Walmart.
Right. Well, and even for that's a typical line that you see in a lot of campaigns of people who would like to cut Social Security, to try to divide and conquer current retirees from future retirees. But the truth of the matter is that when you look at income projections, the Kaiser Family Foundation did an income projection of what middle class wages will look like in 30 years. And they're going to continue to remain flat. There's likely to continue to be growing economic inequality, and as a result, having more time is going to do nothing to help future generations to save more, because they're not going to have any more disposable income because they're going to continue to live paycheck to paycheck. So that's a lie in itself to say that younger people are going to have more time to save. They're not going to have any more money to save.
That's a good point. And there are no more defined benefit pensions. So, what my grandparents' generation, what they were able to retire on, a little bit of savings, their defined benefit pension and Social Security, that stool's not only lost a leg or two, it's been broken up and burnt for firewood.
That's right. In fact, Social Security is about the closest thing most Americans will ever have to a pension.
So again, I keep coming back to this place where what sense does it make that they go after and want to destroy it? I get that they want a desperation class of workers that works till the day they drop, but that isn't really a great political message. That doesn't go well on the bumper sticker.
No, it sure doesn't. I mean, I think that there's still a lot of folks out there that presume that the president has honored his promise that he made during the campaign that he wasn't going to touch Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, and nothing could be further from the truth. So, I said that the straw that broke the camel's back for the National Committee to decide to endorse Vice President Biden was this, eliminating payroll taxes. But there's a long list of other ways that he's broken that promise, including every one of the president's budget would cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid by more than $1 trillion. Got the Medicaid program, which seniors depend on for long-term care, by over $1 trillion. Cut Medicare by about $500 billion, and then cut Social Security disability insurance by more than $60 billion.
And and look, I've seen those numbers. I've talked about that stuff here on the show, and yet I still talk to seniors who are collecting Social Security and depend on their Medicare, who still believe that he's going to protect it. No, he would. It's a belief thing. He wouldn't do that. No. You can show me the facts. You can show me the numbers.
Right.
They're still not buying it.
Right. Well, and I think that the other thing that escapes a lot of people with this latest proposal on the payroll tax is that the reason why a lot of Americans think this is their money, and it is their money because it's an earned benefit they get from paying payroll taxes for a full career. So if the president gets his way and you eliminate payroll taxes, and even if you were to avoid the trust fund literally going bankrupt in 2023, and you backfill that with money from the general treasury, from general revenue, then you eliminate the earned right nature of the program. You can no longer say that it's an earned benefit, which is going to make it easier for people who oppose Social Security to cut benefits or privatize the program.
That's an excellent point, and something I hadn't really thought of. I mean, the fact that you're paying into it, and you say, look, out of my paycheck every week, this is mine. That ownership part of it, once they decouple that, you're right. That I hadn't thought of that. And could that possibly be part of this thinking? Because I get thrown back at me a lot, Dan, that Barack Obama did this. In 2009, Obama gave a payroll tax cut. And it got into our checks, and we didn't really notice it. The difference was he did backfill the money into the trust fund to ensure that it didn't go broke.
Right.
What do you say to that?
Well, we opposed when President Obama did that with obviously with the assistance of Congress. And by the way, he did that with Congress. I mean, it took an act of Congress in order to initiate that payroll tax. In this situation with President Trump, he did unilaterally through an executive order. And even there was members of his own party, especially people like Chuck Grassley, who's chair of the Senate Finance Committee that has jurisdiction over Social Security. They opposed it. So at least there was some bipartisan agreement on doing it back then. But in terms of where the National Committee was back then, we opposed it for the same reason we're opposing it now, because we don't think that any part of payroll taxes should be replaced with general revenue, because it, again, it undermines the earned right nature of the program.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Now, I've said for a very long time, instead of doing this route that Trump has thrown, gut the system by not funding it. What we need to do is we need to scrap the cap, fully fund it, and make sure that it's there for generations to come. Because sadly, we're heading towards a retirement crisis of a tsunami of job losses, and especially for older Americans. And look, not as many people working and funding the program, so in 10, 20, 30 years, we could end up in a bigger problem as well. So for me, this seems, if your goal is to destroy it, very strategic. But if your goal is to keep it, this is a major blunder.
Right. It absolutely is. And your point is very well taken about the retirement crisis. I mean, today, 40% of people who are receiving Social Security depend on it for 90% of their income in retirement. Because of economic inequality, because of flat middle class wages, that dependency is going to grow even more. So it seems counterintuitive to actually be cutting the program, and so that's why we're going to continue to oppose any effort to do that.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: the president came out with this wonderful idea on health care. He's gonna send out some gift cards.
Right.
Seniors are gonna get a gift card before election time, about $200. Come on, it's a nice little gift card. They could pay for maybe 1 or 2 pills.
Right. Well, it's funny what's driving this, of course, and that is that President Trump is doing very poorly. He's underperforming with the senior citizen vote in a lot of the battleground states.
Gee, I wonder why.
Well, there's a very good reason for that, because 8 out of 10 deaths that have been associated with COVID are of people who are 65 and older. So I think that's why, because seniors understand that they've been fed a load of bull about that the coronavirus is going to go away on its own, and people don't really have to worry about it. You don't have to wear a mask. Well, if you're somebody who's 65 and older, you're in a high risk group. If you have cancer, you're in a high risk group. So all those things add together. Seniors are very concerned about where they're going, and actually in the 2016 election, Trump handily won the senior vote. But those people are having buyer remorse because of the way the president has treated the virus. But to get back to your question about this Trump gift card, it's a gimmick, obviously, and it's tried to bring back seniors into the Trump coalition to vote for him in this election. The thing is that when you drill down a little deeper into what he's suggesting that we should do, these cards would cost $7 billion from something called the Most Favored Nation drug pricing program. It's a way to try to bring drug prices down in this country. But it's a program that doesn't even exist yet, and it's not likely to exist before Election Day. So I don't think these cards are ever actually going to get sent out. And the only other thing that he could try to do, which he has dubious legal authority to do, is to dip in the Medicare Trust Fund in order to pay for these cards, which basically would rob Peter to pay Paul for, basically this election gimmick. So, the thing is that Donald Trump has had 4 years to honor his promise to finally allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drugs. And instead, he's listened to his pals with Big Pharma, and he's never done anything to use his bully pulpit, to use his presidential power to move legislation that's passed in the House, and even a bill, a less generous but still a step in the right direction bill that was a bipartisan bill that came out of the Senate Finance Committee, never lit a fire under Mitch McConnell to move this legislation to the Senate floor. So he's had his chance, and again, another reason why the National Committee is supporting Joe Biden, because Joe Biden thinks that Medicare should be allowed to negotiate prescription drugs, and so do 92% of Americans, based on a poll that we did.
Yeah, but Dan, the $200 gift card. A $200 gift card. Come on, man. That's $200.
Right.
Cold hard cash.
Right. Well, that cold hard cash doesn't even exist yet, so it's not happening.
But here's the other part of this, and I've known seniors, and there's prescription drug costs are a whole hell of a lot more than $200. I don't know how far $200 gets you. And the sad reality is that the rate that they're destroying healthcare and making it costlier by going after and trying to destroy the ACA, that $200 might not even buy cat food.
Right. Well, and just to give you one example, Humira, this drug that we see constantly on TV that's used for arthritis, amongst other things, is an anti-inflammatory type of drug that treats, fairly severe issues. I know for Medicare Part D, the beneficiary share of that drug is $4,000, so $200 isn't going to even make a crack in that expense.
But again, it made for a nice sound bite, didn't it?
Right. That's right.
So let me ask you a last line of questioning, because
Sure.
Obviously the president named his choice for to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who I think is going to be horribly destructive for our country and move us in a direction of corporate power that I fear more than anything. I do see the ACA being overturned. How will that affect Medicare? Because I know there are a lot of seniors who've got to be worried that there's a major upheaval with healthcare coming once you rip healthcare away from millions of people, and now pre-existing conditions aren't going to be covered, even though we do have that cute executive order. I'm curious your thought.
Well, I think first off, the executive order is worthless. It doesn't, this is the thing is that, as Trump famously said, who knew healthcare was so complicated. What he doesn't, and what he still doesn't understand, that it takes the framework that was created by the Affordable Care Act in order to protect people from pre-existing conditions. Because you can say, well, there's not, the insurance companies have to insure everybody, but that doesn't mean that they can't charge them, premiums that are $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year because they have diabetes or because they have some sort of pre-existing condition. So we're concerned that if the entire law is validated, people who are not yet eligible for Medicare and they can't work any longer and they can't get insurance through a job, that they're going to be totally out of luck and they're going to be very vulnerable. And then for those who are lucky enough to have Medicare, I think a lot of people don't know that the Affordable Care Act significantly improved Medicare drug benefits. It did away with what's called the donut hole, this big gap that people were on the hook for $2,000 or $3,000 every year for their prescription drugs. Because of the ACA, that's gone.
Yeah.
And so seniors have saved thousands of dollars every year because of that. And then also the Affordable Care Act made it possible for seniors to receive preventive services without having to pay anything out of pocket for it. So we're talking about mammograms and diabetes screening, and you name it. But again, that would go away too if the entire law is validated by the Supreme Court. And then finally, the ACA extended the solvency of the Medicare Part A trust fund by more than 10 years through things like controlling provider payments, reforms on waste, fraud, and abuse, getting a better bang for your buck by rewarding quality over quantity in the Medicare program. But that all goes away too, and so you would accelerate the insolvency of the Medicare Part Trust Fund if the Supreme Court invalidated the ACA.
A whole lot of bad. Dan, I appreciate your time and the thoughts. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Rick.
Dan Adcock, Director of the Government Relations and Policy at the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Make sure you check out their website, ncpssm.org. We'll get links out on social media. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Would you be willing to stand up in solidarity with your fellow workers, even if it cost you your job? Well, on this day in labor history, the workers at Mersey Docks and Harbour Company in Liverpool, England, answered that question. The year was 1995. 329 Mercy dock workers refused to cross a picket line that was being walked against another company on the docks. The workers at Torside had been fired for protesting against erosions in job security and increasingly unpredictable scheduling. They were speaking out against the casualization of their labor. When the Mersey dock workers would not cross the Torside picket line, they too were fired. Dock workers across the world stood up in solidarity with the Mersey workers against this unjust treatment. They knew if it could happen in Liverpool, it might happen anywhere. Pickets sprung up from Norway to Japan, from Australia to Italy, and into the United States. It was a global outpouring of solidarity. The strike wore on for 850 days. 1 year into the strike, dock workers held an international day of action in support of the Liverpool workers. Finally, 2.5 years after they were fired, the dock workers agreed to a settlement. They did not get their jobs back, but they did get severance pay. A film was made about the struggle. The proceeds were used to purchase a bar in Liverpool. It is known as the Dockers Pub and has become a space for working class organizing. The International Dock Workers Council was also born from this strike. Today, the council has 90,000 members, a lasting movement of solidarity. 20 years after the strike, dock workers from across the world gathered in Liverpool to remember the struggle. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I gotta wonder, Trump offered the gift cards for seniors, that $200, hey, $200 goes a long way. Also the payroll tax holiday that you're probably gonna have to pay back in April anyway. I gotta wonder if the $200 is something that seniors are gonna have to pay on too. And the reason I bring that up is we find out that Donald Trump over the last 17 years that they got his tax return paid like $1,500. So I gotta wonder if those wonderful gifts that Donald has bestowed upon us are things that we're gonna have to pay back anyway, to fund the fact that he hasn't paid his taxes. And here to share some thoughts on his on the bombshell New York Times story and Trump's tax returns, I've asked Matthew Gardner to come talk with us. Matthew is a senior fellow at the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy. Matthew, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So am I getting this right? From 2000 to 2017, we got a guy sitting in the White House that paid a whopping $1,500 in taxes. Am I getting that right?
In general, yeah. What we know from the Times is they looked at 18 years. They found a tax bill of zero in 11 of those years, $750 a year for another couple of years, and there are a few other years in which he probably paid something more. But it's a pretty steady streak of paying little or nothing in a period when he allegedly was making an awful lot of money.
Yeah, so is this the smoking gun? I know a lot of people in the last couple of years, they thought, oh my gosh, if we got the tax returns, this is going to be the smoking gun, going to take him down. Is this going to matter?
Well, it depends. I mean, on one level, this is not news. The New York Times, a lot of these same guys have reported in the past year pretty similar things.
Right.
What's interesting about it, and what I think might make this a little stickier than the prior revelations, is that there's some shady stuff going on here. There are a couple of stories that indicate that it's maybe not just as simple as him using, as he has said, the legal tax breaks that are available to everybody. And in particular, there are a couple of cases where really the most charitable thing you can say is that he is pushing the line between what's legal and what's not. And there are a couple of things in here that just make any sensible reader ask, why has the IRS not already reversed this? Why is it even under audit in the case of this one $700 million deduction he's probably claiming wrong? So there's some real indications that he's just not, things aren't as straightforward and as purely legal as he's claimed they are.
Yeah, that's what I said from the beginning. I go, look, for the most part, I'm sure it's not illegal, and he's pushed the boundaries because there were some stories over the last couple of years that he had taken a housing tax credit that there was no way he was eligible for because it was a low income tax credit, and the joke was, well, he's clearly not as rich as he claims he is, and I think these tax returns show some of that.
Yeah, that's right. The claim has always been, wink and a nod that that Trump is a very rich and very successful guy in the real world who is able to transmogrify his income into a tax loss, but it's a fake loss done strictly for tax purposes using depreciation. He's always said depreciation is his best friend. What this says to me, the revelations in this report, is that maybe he really does just lose a lot of money in the real world. Maybe he's just not that good a business person at all. And this is true in particular of the debts. There are two numbers that really jumped out on the debt front from this. One is that over the past decade, he's basically walked away from something like $260 million of debts. Debts that, like the folks he owed the money to just basically said, we're not collecting it. They wrote off the debts, which itself is an indicator of the guy stiffing everybody right and left, either because he can't pay or because he won't pay. The other thing is that right now, the Times says he's got in excess of $400 million of debts that he owes to somebody, much of which is going to come due in the next 4 years, which, it's possible that he's got the liquidity to pay some of this stuff. But the pretty clear sense you get from the article is that this is a guy who's been selling off his assets, the ones that didn't already get lost to bankruptcy. He has less and less. And so it's not at all obvious to me that he's got the capacity to pay these debts off. This to me seems to be like somebody who's in a pretty unstable financial situation.
Where he's going to walk out of the White House and file bankruptcy again. And
Right.
This is one of those moments where, the $400+ million that he owes, there are a lot of people going, well, who does he owe it to? And is this one of those moments where could it be some shady people who are leveraging him for one thing or another? There's a whole bunch of this is why you vet candidates from the beginning and why we should have had this information in 2015.
Yeah, that's right. And, the focus on the debts and whether his income is really substantial. I hate to say it because I'm a tax guy, but this suddenly becomes less of a tax story and more of an income story. What does this guy actually have? Is it all an illusion? The debt thing, I think, is important, again, for non-tax reasons, for exactly the reason you allude to. If you've ever owned substantial money to anybody, you're in debt to anybody you know that it changes the relationship you have with people. It's no longer a level relationship. You're in debt in multiple senses to these people. If any of the people to whom he owes this huge amount of money are people he deals with regularly in the foreign policy community, then it's entirely plausible that his decisions in the past 4 years, certainly his decisions if, God forbid, he wins election, have been and would be tainted by that relationship. It's I think, as Pelosi called it today, a national security risk, and something that people look for when they're hiring for high security positions. Do you have large debts? So it's a real concern in ways that go way beyond sort of these basic questions of tax payments. And that actually is, I think, something that gives me a little bit of hope. If he's been bulletproof on the tax stuff forever, because a lot of the people who support him just say silently or think, well, I'd do that too if they could. I don't think anybody thinks that way about debt, about massive amounts to debt to some possibly very shady people. People understand that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's certainly not something you aspire to, and it's not the sign of a successful businessman.
Yeah, because we were sold on the idea that he was going to run things like his business, and I kept saying all along, if you look at his businesses, they're not doing that great. And now we have tax returns to show that. And look, we've got an economy in shambles. So he has taken his business acumen and brought it to the public sector, and here we are, successive trillion-dollar deficits. Massive debt that they've added onto the national debt, and that's even outside of the pandemic. We were running trillion-dollar deficits without the pandemic.
That's right. And this leads into something I wanted to mention, which is that even before the pandemic, one of the most obvious solutions for this problem, giving more money to the IRS to enforce the tax laws, wasn't happening. Even before the pandemic, we were already paring back our spending as a nation on tax enforcement. The IRS in 2020, this was a decision made a lifetime ago in February of 2020 when the pandemic wasn't a thing. Congress appropriated an amount for the IRS budget for 2020 that was less in inflation-adjusted terms than what they'd done in 2019, which it turns out they've done now 10 years in a row. We're spending less money on the IRS in real terms than we had the prior years. That means less enforcement. It is the reason why audits of high-income individuals are nearing an all-time low. It's the reason why we're auditing low-income people more than we're auditing high-income people. There's a ProPublica did an excellent study last year where they showed that the single county in the U.S., you probably know this already, that has the highest audit rate is Humphrey County, Mississippi, which also is one of the poorest, most rural, and yes, most African-American counties in the nation. We're targeting low-income, poor minorities who claim the EITC, not the wealthy folks like President Trump, who are clearly able to beat the tax system like a piñata because they know the enforcement isn't coming for them.
So for me, isn't this where we should be talking about? I mean, this, I know, Trump being part of this, dominates the story, but I've been talking about this for years. The fact that the pendulum has swung. And look, in 2010, I was with the T-twits who were running around screaming taxed enough already. Only their solutions were just insane and lost me almost immediately. But look, we've seen a tax code that swung the massive amount of wealth to the top. We've created the world's largest billionaire class. In fact, the largest billionaire class in history at the expense of the working class. There was just a study done the other day by Nick Hanauer and my friend David Rolfe, who came out and said, look, the working class is getting ripped off at a tune of about $2.5 trillion each and every year for the last 45 years. And where do you think that money goes? To people like Trump and his ilk who are cheating like hell on their taxes.
That's right. And, I think it's worth pointing out that the CARES Act, which most people think of sensibly as a bill containing a lot of short-term relief for working class folks, also included, incredibly, a huge tax break, $135 billion over 10 years, exactly for people like President Trump, increasing their ability to use losses, usually made-up business losses, to offset their income tax in prior years going back. It's basically a tax cut that was tailor-made for continuing the sort of practices that the New York Times just outlined yesterday. So it's not just a past history thing. Somehow, incredibly, this huge tax cut geared by definition towards millionaires was one of the biggest tax items in the CARES Act, a thing that was ostensibly all about COVID relief. Yeah. So this is very much a work in progress.
No, and again, you look at the CARES Act, and it was a huge handout to corporate America. I was not a fan of some of the things it did. The $500 billion slush fund to hand out to corporate America, I wasn't in favor of. I said what we should have done is we should have made the workers whole, give the money to them, and it'll flow to the corporations. They'll get theirs. But no, we had to have our corporate welfare first and foremost, and this is where we are as a country. So I guess the question then becomes, are we surprised when you have a government run by the very wealthy and funded by wealthy donors, that you have a tax code that benefits them?
Sadly, it's not surprising. And I think it is important at this point to recognize that the legal tax breaks that the president has used here, depreciation, net operating losses are the big ones. These aren't like Republican, Democratic partisan divides. These are tax breaks that both parties have, when they've had a chance to pare them back, chosen not to. And in fact, in the last tax cut, they even expanded these things. So there is blame to go around. The good news is I think we're seeing a shift toward recognizing this is unacceptable, recognizing this is a problem. And it's a shift we're seeing both in terms of public opinion, which is now radically in favor of making corporations and the rich pay their fair share, but also in terms of policy. And it comes from people like Elizabeth Warren, who have proposed both a wealth tax on individuals and a strong corporate minimum tax, the latter of which is now something that candidate Biden has said he wants to do as well. So the direction of policy promises that we're seeing and the direction of public opinion, I think, is shifting enough that eventually Congress is going to have to listen. If enough people get mad about companies not paying their share, about Trump being emblematic of a whole class of the richest Americans who aren't paying their fair share, I think we're going to see policy follow public opinion a little bit.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right, because there's a lot of things we're mad about that doesn't seem to be addressed. Maybe this will be one of it. In the last line of questioning I wanted to get to, because you use the term fair share, and there are a lot of people going, well, the rich pay all the taxes. Matthew, they've got all the money, so clearly the thought is they pay all the taxes. And I always throw back that, during the good socialist years of Dwight David Eisenhower, the top marginal tax rate was considerably higher. In fact, more than double at 92%. Where are we talking about, moving this back to? AOC took a whole ton of guff over saying, people making over $10 million a year should be taxed at, oh my goodness, 40%. I'm curious, is there a place where you guys are looking, going, maybe this is where we need to be? Because look, I think we're coming to the reality that we can't have a country run by oligarchs, that we can't have a country of extraordinarily wealthy people who have the kind of outweighed power and speech that our Supreme Court has given them.
Well, I think, fairness is obviously in the eye of the beholder. We have right now a slightly progressive tax system overall. The only way you can describe it as this socialist nightmare is by looking just at the federal income tax, the one tax we have that is clearly progressive. But it's stacked up against a federal system which has huge amount of state and local taxes that fall disproportionately on those at the bottom of the income spectrum. So we have overall a system that is pretty darn close to flat. It's a lot less progressive than it used to be. Fairness has been a big casualty of the 2017 tax cuts, of the tax cuts pushed through by George W. Bush before that and by President Reagan before that. One totally straightforward strategy for getting back a little closer to fairness would be to take away tax breaks for capital gains, to get us to a place where the capital income reported by the wealthiest shareholders has to be paid at the same, you pay tax at the same rate that low-income workers pay. That's a pretty straightforward ask that almost anybody would agree with. And so I think that's a straightforward place to go. Obviously, as the New York Times report has shown, we also need to think a lot more seriously about adequately enforcing the tax laws we already have. It's so clear from this that a lot of the strategies President Trump has gone with, he's doing it because he has no expectation that the IRS is going to have the teeth to come after him. You're writing off $70,000 of hair care expenses as a business expense. We know that's not a business expense. Paying his daughter $740,000 in consulting fees to do a job that she was already responsible for as an employee. It's transparently tax avoidance and possibly even tax evasion. We don't know, but at best it's suspicious, and it's indicative of a system where the laws don't mean anything. So yeah, capital gains, think about higher marginal tax rates on the best off, a millionaire's tax, if you will, but also get to a point where people like President Trump and other upper income taxpayers can't just get away with whatever they want, as they apparently are.
Yeah, no, because I was going to bring that up about Ivanka Trump and her consulting fees, because I was going to ask you, is there a way that I can pay my kids to be consultants here on the show so that I can fund their college? Can I write that off?
Well, I'm working on the hair care thing myself. It's going to take me a few decades to work up $70,000, but yeah, it's trailblazing stuff would be the polite way to describe it.
There you go. Scary stuff. I guess before I let you go, what do you think the message out of this should be? Because there's a lot of people saying, Democrats should let this go. Is this a big deal?
It's a big deal in that it's a big deal in a non-tax sense. The tax stuff is old news. I mean, he's bragged about not paying taxes. What's new and really damaging and frankly frightening, I think, to most of us is what we don't know about how much debt the president really has, and these very scary questions about who he owes money to. This could really be a national security risk of exactly the sort that people have been warning us about. And it brings into question the honesty and the legitimacy of the foreign policy decisions he's been making, some pretty puzzling ones for the last 4 years. So that, I think, is what we need to be focusing on. Not what this says about his taxes, already a pretty established thing, but the questions this asks about who this guy owes.
No, excellent point. Matthew, I appreciate the time. As always, good stuff.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much, Matthew Gardner, Senior Fellow at the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy. You can check out their website, itep.org. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Amazingly, America has become a nation of socialists, asking in dismay, where's the government? These are not born-again Bernie Sanders activists, but everyday people of all political stripes, including previously apolitical multitudes who are now clamoring for big government intervention in their lives. Nothing like a spreading coronavirus pandemic to bring home the need that all of us have, both as individuals and as a society, for an adequately funded, fully functioning, competent government capable of serving all. Instead, in our moment of critical national need, Trump's government has been a rickety medicine show run by a small-minded flim-flammer peddling laissez-fairyland snake oil. We have it totally under control, Trump pompously declared after the first U.S. case was confirmed in January. For weeks, as the pandemic spread out of control, he did nothing. An increasingly anxious public found that they couldn't even get reliable test kits from Trump's hollowed-out government health agencies. Still, he shrugged off all concern and responsibility. By April, in theory, he said, when it gets a little warmer, it miraculously goes away. Not exactly a can-do Rooseveltian response to a national crisis. That complete absence of White House leadership is why a deadly pathogen is now raging practically everywhere across our land. Unknown millions of us are being infected. A closed indefinitely sign has literally been hung on the American economy, and even our people's social and civic interactions, the essence of community life, have been halted. This is Jim Hightower saying, right-wing politico Grover Norquist once said he wanted a government so small I can drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub. Trump has shown us what such a small-minded government looks like and what it costs us.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Florida is completely open for business. No more worried about those mask restrictions. The bars and the restaurants, swing the doors open, elbow to elbow, rub together, do what you got to do because Florida's open, baby. Evidently the governor there has lifted all restrictions. You do what you got to do, even though you had another 2,000 additional cases on Sunday, topping 700,000 there in the state. You've had over 14,000 people who have died. But hey, got to get your chicken wings and your beer on Sunday. It just is what it is. Also, a new study out from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, our good old CDC. About 280,000 kids in the U.S. have contracted the coronavirus. So yay. What could possibly go wrong when you swing the school doors open? That is a beautiful thing. And finally, on the COVID front, the first cruise ship to operate coming out of Germany, they have set on their third cruise a massive COVID outbreak. So expect them to be sitting in the water for some time. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the craziness, the virus, and of course, the big debates coming up. I've asked our good friend Propane Jane to come back and talk with us. Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back.
So Florida's wide open. You can go to Florida, do whatever you want. You could have even taken a cruise until now.
I mean, it's insane. It really is insane. And I just I wonder if it's a function of, people having pandemic fatigue and just being tired of the new normal, right? I mean,
Yep.
the abnormal, and they want to just force normal back. Like, okay, if we just do the things we originally wanted to do, it'll be fine. We can go back to the way it was. We'll just wear masks even. I mean, in like with the schools, obviously they have all these ideas about, okay, we're going to go in person, we're going to distance, we're going to have the classroom this size, we're going to sanitize, we're going to make them wear the mask, and it's all going to work out fine. And there's just this sort of magical thinking aspect to it, as if there really is such a thing as, achieving 80% herd immunity overnight, with no vaccination in circulation. In many ways, it sounds like they believe that it is going to just magically disappear the way Trump said it would, lied that it would.
Yeah.
And this is where we are, another on the cusp of another, a third wave, as they're calling it.
Yeah, no, well, have we gotten through the first wave yet?
I don't think so.
Did I miss that? Because I was expecting the second wave here in October, November. Did I miss that one? I hope I missed it.
I mean, it just seems like it's all the same wave to me.
Yeah, I didn't think we got out of the first one yet
I didn't
because we
think we
keep
did
doing
either.
dumb stuff like having a little motorcycle rally in the middle of the country and then dispersing them throughout the rest of the country. And now we see the Midwest is exploding.
Exactly. And what's going to be the readout on all of these Trump rallies? I really think they should be tracking, what did their numbers look like in these towns, in these places that are busing all these people in and paying them $12 or whatever the fee is to get them to go to these rallies and boost Trump's narcissistic supply. What's going to be the fallout from that in a lot of these rural areas and red states that he's going to?
Yeah, I mean it's just nuts. But here's the thing: I get the COVID fatigue because I'm right there. I'm ready for this to be over. I'm tired of wearing a mask. I'm tired of not being able to go out to restaurants and do things that I used to do. We're not doing it, but I'd like to go back to being somewhat normal. I don't get the whole going on a cruise thing. I mean, especially when you're coming out of Greece. I mean, you're going to get on a boat with 2,500 people. I mean, I don't know. I'm just not there yet. I don't know what would make you go, that's a good idea. Let's do that, honey.
No, I think that it's just either complete magical thinking. I'm going to be totally fine. We're going to be separated. We're going to do this, that, and the other. They're going to check people's temperatures. And I think even beyond that, there's a lot of people that are just sort of going, whatever. I'm a healthy person. I don't have any major medical things going on. So, hey, what if I do get it, then fine, I'll just get it and I'll deal with it. They're not necessarily thinking I'll get it and I'll have the worst possible outcome or I may actually die.
Right.
And in some instances, they may be thinking, like the Trump voter said, if I die, I die.
Yeah.
and that's all around the world. That's not just here. You're always going to find people who ultimately want to do what they want to do, regardless of what the rules and regulations are saying or what the recommendations are.
Right.
They just want to do what they want to do, and they don't want to be told they can't do it.
No, I get that. I've said before, I'm a fatalist. I believe when it's my time, it's going to be my time. The difference is if someone's shooting at me, I don't jump up and say, over here.
Right.
I will duck. And this is one of those moments where you duck. I do believe if I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it. But I still do the social distancing. I still do the mask thing. I try to take common sense approach to not getting it. And sadly, we're not that country. And look, some people might even be suicidal. They want it. I was talking to the one guy who said, we used to take our kids around and they'd get the mumps and the measles and the chicken pox. We don't do that anymore. I'm going, are you really suggesting that we go around and get people sick? And this is what the guy was kind of his mentality. Well, we made it through, made us tougher.
No, I really do think that's what a lot of people are thinking. And in regards to DeSantis, and obviously I'm here in the state of Texas. I mean, we haven't gone as far as he has gone, but I'm sure Abbott wants to get there sooner rather than later. And I think as we've seen since March, this motivation and this priority for the businesses to be running at their pre-pandemic capacity. The money-driven aspects of this, I think, are really what we really have to speak to in our society, because it is why people are rushing back to work. It is why people don't have the ability to stay home and have that be, supplemented by the government in stimulus. And that's, again, the difference that we've seen just from, our northern neighbor, Canada, and what they did with their economic policy in terms of actually paying out to people so they don't have to take that risk and make those choices. But here in vulture capitalism, again, the essential workers, the idea of the essential workers, the people at the top in the ivory tower, these Republicans that are making these decisions are saying, those people in a lot of ways are expendable. They need to get the engine running. They need to get the wheels of the machine turning. And yes, some of them are going to die, but in their minds, they're thinking that's a sacrifice for the greater good, because look what this is going to do for the economy. Look what this is going to do for the stock market. We need this money in the till. These businesses need to stay open, because for them as a red state governor, they know good and well they're not going to do anything that has sort of any hints of socialism, any hints of paying out to the public to support the people. They want to make it a supply-side private sector issue and think the businesses are going to be able to solve this problem.
Yeah. And also, as one person told me from the beginning, and I don't know if he was joking or if he was serious, we get to kill off the weak and the old, and we don't have to pay for them.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I very much think that that's how they think. Even in terms of the healthcare debate that we've been having for decades in this country, the way they think about people who get medical illness is, it's a very survival of the fittest. Well, either you should have taken more personal responsibility. I mean, it's something that they still actually say. And also, well, just maybe you're a weakling. Maybe this just is what it is, and if you're not going to survive, you're not going to survive. Maybe this is Darwin.
No, I've had people tell me that this is how we thin the herd. And look, I've used that phrase myself when stupid people do dumb things, like the white nationalist who shot himself in the groin. I'm going, good. This way he doesn't reproduce. That's how we thin the herd. And I know that's a bit harsh.
Yeah.
But he shot himself. He literally did. I didn't shoot him, and no one else did, I guess. I guess I'm justifying it, aren't I?
Well, again, this is the country that we live in. I mean, this is the attitude that people have had in this country for centuries. I mean, if you think about a country, again, like I said last week, being founded on the basis of slavery, right? That entire economics is based on, I don't really care what happens to the people that are doing the work. They can be raped, they can be killed, they can be beaten, their families can be broken up. We're not going to let them read. We're not going to let them write. We're not going to let them have any sense of purpose or fulfillment outside of being in chains and doing what we tell them they have to do. And so, again, I think that mentality, although it's not, at that extreme, in the modern day, there's still this aspect, that
there's still parts of that.
Yeah, exactly. It courses through our immigration policy. It courses through our labor policy. It courses through our policy on reproductive rights,
education,
the pay gap, all of those things.
Yep. No. I mean, you're absolutely right. We've done a marvelous job in this country of keeping the working class, where they belong in their place, because we're still going to need hand laborers. And look at what we've done with higher education. I mean, it's damn near impossible for the average working family to send their kid to college.
Yeah, it is. And I think even, beyond that, when you get back to the politics of it and you're looking at the Republican Party, and again, my favorite topic, the Southern strategy, so much of that language in how they talk about handouts and welfare queen and, that they don't want their taxes raised and all of these things that are proxies for that idea of some people should be the haves, some people should be the have-nots. And it's not even really so much about class. It's about a caste system. It's about having this built-in, delineation between what had traditionally been white land-owning people. And again, over time, we have allowed those rights to be expanded to more and more groups. But again, that group that used to be at the top and so far above what everybody else was doing in that caste system is starting to feel like, hey, wait a minute, we're losing something in this, because the fortunes for people who are in that bottom rung, especially amongst like the white impoverished people of this country, has really gone down. The job prospects, the life expectancy has gone down. There, like you always talk about, the middle class has been drained. And so I think that, more and more these messages that are being targeted to these groups of people, even though they may not have anything, a lot of this cultural identity and a lot of the bigotry that we hear coming from Trump, I think is just sort of soothe, any worries they may be having economically, to say, hey, you're still on top. Because of this belief system, because we're in power, you're still going to be okay, even though that's not really the case on the ground, and these people are still suffering, and the Republican Party's offering absolutely nothing for them.
No, and I talked about this the other day. I mean, what the right wing of this country has done masterfully is they have convinced, especially the white working class, that all of the other groups, the immigrants, the blacks, the Hispanics, all the others are the reason that their lives are worse off. And I said, look, the white guy in the suit who rammed through the legislation that taxed unemployment back during the Reagan years, that was a slap in the face to all workers. It didn't matter what color you were. The white guy in the business suit who pushed and lobbied for all of the attacks on labor, all of the tax on a progressive tax code, healthcare, education, go down the list. All of the things that have affected your life. That wasn't immigrants. That wasn't the black guy down the street. That was the rich business white guy with the nice suit and driving the nice car, who decided that that's what he wanted. And we have a government that decides who gets what. He controls our government. He decides.
Yeah, and this whole tax thing now, this tax return thing with Trump, and even the idea that that the make or break for him in this situation is, oh my gosh, what if people, finally find out that he was a terrible businessman? Well, it's like, how much proof did we already have that he was a terrible businessman? But even despite all of that, that is what so many people who didn't want to say that they were behind him because of the bigotry, or they were behind him because, he wanted to do these really draconian policies, in terms of the Muslim ban and building the wall, that type of thing, they didn't necessarily want to say that's what they were signing on for. But what they did want to sign on for was that he was this great, successful businessman.
Right.
And so the idea that none of that was actually the case, I think even more so raises this question of, no, what's really left there? What was really the reason why you were behind this guy? Because now we know he's not as wealthy as he says he was. He's not as successful as he says he was. And you're still backing him anyway when you said that was the reason you were backing him 4 years ago.
Yeah, good point.
What's up?
No, I mean, look, we already knew what was in these tax returns. For me, there were no surprises there. All this stuff's been reported on. Some of the cute things like the $70,000 deduction for his hair, or the $750,000 in consulting fees for his daughter. Got me thinking, hey, is there a way I can have my kids be consultants here to the show and be able to afford to pay their college bill? No, I'd go to jail. That's the difference between me and Donald Trump.
Yeah. And that's the privilege, right? I mean, that's the generational wealth and the white privilege that he has gotten because of that he's been able to evade even doing the thing that so many of us have to do. Even people who are undocumented, are paying more in taxes than this man is.
It's crazy. So anything in the tax returns? Because I was going to ask you about the tax returns real quick. Anything in there that was surprising to you? Because they're really not anything for me, but anything for you?
No, nothing surprising to me. I am sort of interested in, I think it's interesting that all of this is just now coming out right before the election. In the sense that we've already been getting drip, drip, drip of Deutsche Bank and all of these things. I mean, I have articles, you know how my evergreen tweet machine works.
Right.
I have articles going back to 2017 that were talking about the fact that he had very questionable things in terms of the amount of debt that he owed and the fact that no American banks would loan to him and that he had to go to Deutsche Bank and that, what were they doing to, back this, that there had to be some influence from foreign powers. And so I think those questions were being raised all the way back then and were being discussed by the intelligence officials. And so much of Mueller's work that obviously was suppressed and redacted, et cetera, was looking into his finances. So I think, again, the most disappointing thing about this story, in addition to so many other stories that have been broken and called bombshells over the last couple of months, is like, this is something that has been here all this time, but now all of a sudden we're generating a certain level of outrage and expecting the outcome to be different when he's already done the damage.
Right. See, I don't see the outrage.
I don't either.
I mean, if you were outraged, you should have been outraged, 4 years ago. This is all stuff that's been dripping out, and we've heard these stories. The 10 years of not paying any taxes, we already knew that. That was already out there. It's just now that you're right. It's ginned up, and especially before the debate. I thought it was interesting. Howard Stern said that that in order for Trump to be allowed to debate, Biden should demand his tax returns, which I thought was a pretty good take. I wanted to get your thoughts real quick on how you think the big debate's going to go.
I think it's going to be a poop show. I really honestly do, because I think Trump is going to name call. I really do think he can't discuss policy. So I think he's going to get down in the mud, and I think it's going to be hard to keep track of anything he's saying because he's just going to filibuster with nonsense and more lies. So I'm hoping that there's some, active fact-checking that takes place. Otherwise, I think Biden will do a great job, but I do think that there are probably going to be some contentious moments where Biden is going to have to pull some Scranton out, and it may actually be less of a policy discussion just because you can't really talk policy with somebody who's a complete idiot like that.
My mind is I'm waiting for that one moment where Biden just goes, no, keep going. You're doing
Right.
just fine.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, and obviously, like Nancy Pelosi, seems to be in the camp that says nobody, he shouldn't be debated at all, because it's just going to be a complete waste of time. I do think it's important for Biden to go and stand there. And
You got to stand up to a bully.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I do think he actually does need to be on the stage with him. But I do think that this is really one of those moments where Trump is he's doing a lot of projection in the way he's sort of saying, Biden should be drug tested ahead of time. And I mean, it's really bizarre to me that he's coming out
And lowering the bar.
Well, lowering the bar and in many ways pointing the finger back at himself. I mean, I've been calling for Donald Trump to be drug tested since 2015.
As we all have been. We want to know what's on his head.
Yeah. So, I mean, every debate performance for him, there's and even the, whatever they're calling these pressers and press availabilities out on the campaign trail. I mean, he seems like he's either, drugged up or, he looks weird, he's sniffling, he's sweating profusely. I mean, there's so many things that he does, I think, in the debate that he's trying to sort of, in many ways, I think, want Biden to be so inept and on his same level that he's trying to accuse him of having the same problems that he knows he actually has. So I think that's why the projection is so telling. I don't think he thinks he's going to do well. And I think that's why he's putting all of these, just totally absurd comments ahead of the debate, because he wants it to be a clown show. He honestly does.
But I don't think it matters to him how he does, because it's still going to be the best he's ever done, and no one's ever done better, and no one, because he's got these ticks. It's the most tremendous ever. It's the best ever.
Right.
People ask me, how do you do so well? They can't understand it. Anytime he has those little, that's his tick. Anytime he's lying, those ticks come out.
It is. I do think that the dynamics, because again, I remember the Hillary debates. I thought she won all of them. But I do think the way he menaced her on the stage, that dichotomy between, him being very toxic, a very ugly representation of toxic masculinity, I think that will be interesting to have him juxtaposed with an actual man who is not displaying those traits, who is, obviously has the reputation for being the more statesman-like individual in the race. And so I think for people who want to see somebody talk, very calmly, very intelligently about the problems that we face and what the solutions are actually going to be, I think that's really all the point of the debate is at this point.
So no chance of rolling up the sleeves and Biden kicking his behind?
No. It'd be nice, though. I think I think a lot of people want to see Trump actually have his what handed to him.
Yeah. And finally, I'm sure you saw yesterday in Florida, Trump's former campaign manager, this Brad Parscale. I don't know, was he arrested? Did he barricade himself in? I guess he was beating the wife, maybe. Whatever was going on there.
Yeah.
Curious, your thoughts?
Well, from what I read, it sounds like there was a possibility that he was definitely, abusing his wife in some way, possibly homicidal and suicidal. So, that's the first thing that jumped out to me, from a psychiatrist standpoint, was that he got Baker acted, which ultimately means that, you get taken in by the authorities and you're on a 72-hour hold. For observation, and whatever's revealed during that time, hopefully is an opportunity to say, okay, what was going on? Were you intoxicated at the time? They will check your urine, they will figure out, what was going on and what the circumstances were, and what is it that's going on that you can't regulate yourself and stop yourself from being physically abusive to other people, and also possibly, a danger to your own self. And so, you hope that, he gets the treatment he needs and that he's safe and his wife is safe. But I think the larger issue, again, as we continue to see from people who are in Trump's circle, that working for this man destroys lives. It destroys individuals and it destroys families. And I was just reading on Twitter that there was this, big breaking thing over this Channel 4 News in the UK breaking this story about the link between Cambridge Analytica and the voter suppression efforts, and how they were, had special tactics for marking black voters as someone, voters that needed to be deterred from voting. And this is a breaking story. This is his campaign, and the hits keep coming. And I'm not saying that's, directly the thing that Parscale was worried about or the stressor that precipitated that event. But if all of that is true, then he likely committed perjury and some other things. And so, is that what's going on? And why is it that so many people around Trump are having these types of crises take place in their lives?
Yeah, no, because I said the same thing. I get ready to see a whole bunch of these.
Yeah.
Because the one article said he's suffering from alcohol abuse and PTSD.
Yep.
And I'm going, he was Trump's mouthpiece. Is that traumatic? And the answer is yes. I mean, these people are, there's going to be a number of them going to jail, and I can imagine that that's going to be fairly stressful.
Yeah, and I mean, have you seen this video of Don Jr.? I mean, he looks awful.
Yeah, but he's always looked coked up to me, so.
I agree, and that's another thing, right? I mean, again, just to add to your list of the examples, these people are flipping out in very public ways, and I think that's a harbinger for what's underneath this whole administration and how the walls are really crashing in.
Yeah, but I look at the arrest video, and I got to tell you, you're the health professional. Maybe you've got a better take on this. I've been saying for a long time, police tactics I'm uncomfortable with.
Right.
From the video, and this is purely from the video, and as you've said, there was a whole bunch of other things going on there. I didn't see a need to throw him to the ground and jump on him like they did. They were clearly had him, he was calm.
Yeah.
Now, look, I guess this is the weird world that I'm in. Had the cops drug him in the back and beat him up behind the bushes for beating up the wife, I would say maybe you shouldn't do that. But the idea that the guy was calm, you didn't have to escalate that situation, which could have turned uglier in my view.
Oh, for sure.
Because I said it months ago, you never see anybody arrested by put your hands on the car, put your hands behind your back anymore. It's always somebody getting tackled and slammed to the ground like that.
Oh, absolutely. I can attest. I mean, I worked in these acute settings and, had tons of patients that were brought in by police on mental health warrants. We don't call it a Baker Act in Texas, but, bruised up and very much saying they assaulted me. And again, they're here for they're here for a behavioral health reason. We actually got to see to what's going on with them mental health-wise. But apart from that, we are faced with the, aspect of it that, yes, in the course of getting them here to safety, to treatment, this happened, and it was a result of the people who we sent out there, their families called the authorities or somebody called the authorities to help. And this is the danger that was there. So, again, I have been fortunate to work with teams that are crisis response teams that are, police officers that are trained specifically in mental health de-escalation tactics and how to actually subdue people safely without agitating them even more, how to talk to them appropriately and respectfully. But again, you have to have that specific type of training, and what we see too often is that so many police departments are not getting that training, and they don't value it, sadly, in many of these jurisdictions. When they're called out on it, they don't value it. So that's just another aspect of how the police system really is broken, and we need to reform it. But we need to have people who actually are willing to first say, this is a problem. Yeah.
Like I said, had they beat the crap out of him for beating up his wife, I probably would have said that you shouldn't have done that. But that I just maybe it's just me, but just a bit too far. But there you go. As always, I appreciate the time, Jane. Good stuff as always. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome. Have a great week and be safe.
You as well. Our good friend Propane Jane. Let's take a quick break. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Should they have taken him down the way they did? Was that not excessive? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
We have to deliver more than platitudes. We have to deliver more than proposals and promises.
California promises to end sales of new gas-powered vehicles by 2035. U.S. is seeing an alarming increase in combined heat waves and droughts. Plus,
COVID-19 reminds us that humankind should launch a green revolution and preserve the environment and make Mother Earth a better place for all.
China pledges major emissions cuts.
All of those pledges and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Humankind can no longer afford to ignore the repeated warnings of nature.
Oh, really? Just watch us, China. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, you promised me we have big news in today's Green News Report.
Oh my, yes we do. As we go to air, the 11th Annual Climate Week is underway in New York City when business, government, activists, and community leaders meet to discuss solutions to the climate crisis.
That's the big news?
We're getting there. It's primarily virtual this year due to the global pandemic. Many corporations and governments have announced commitments to cut their contribution to greenhouse gas emissions that cause dangerous global warming. Walmart, financial giant Morgan Stanley, Ford, and Facebook are among the corporations that announced new commitments to reach net zero emissions in their operations in coming decades.
Coming decades? That doesn't seem very big.
Well, it doesn't happen all at once. It
I
just takes
see.
time.
Okay.
Britain's Prince Charles, however, urged the companies to do more.
Billions of people around the world are waiting and longing for concerted action to right the balance of this planet that we have so rashly disrupted. Millions of younger employees of countless companies and corporations are desperate for action, not more words.
Well, that's slightly bigger.
Well, in the biggest announcement, on Tuesday, Chinese President Xi Jinping increased his country's pledge to cut their emissions under the landmark United Nations Paris Climate Accord. China announced that it will scale up its national climate target to reach peak emissions before 2030. That's a change. And carbon neutrality before 2060. That is a big deal.
Okay, that's a big deal.
President Xi echoed leaders of the European Union in pushing for a green revolution to accelerate the transition away from fossil fuels. Now, climate policy experts noted that details on China's plan are thin so far, but they did call it the most significant positive climate development globally since the signing of the Paris Agreement.
Then why do Republicans and Donald Trump keep telling us that China will never do anything about climate change?
Because they are lying.
Oh.
Donald Trump's withdrawal of the U.S. from the accord, the only nation in the world to do so, will come into effect the day after the presidential election on November 3rd. Speaking of the presidential election, according to the Nonpartisan Commission on Presidential Debates, the 6 topics selected by moderator Chris Wallace of Fox News for the very first debate between Donald Trump and Democratic nominee Joe Biden on Tuesday will not include climate change. A new analysis by Media Matters has found that half of the handful of climate questions asked by Democratic presidential debate moderators were asked with a right-wing framing and failed to inform the public about the climate crisis and potential solutions.
So Fox News' Chris Wallace just won't ask about them at all. And why should he? It's not like climate change has been a topic of note of late, given the fires up and down the West Coast and the endless hurricanes smashing into this country. But what do I know?
Speaking of those wildfires, if it seems to you like wildfire season is getting worse, you're right. A new study concludes that climate change has driven, quote, an alarming increase in the incidence of simultaneous heat waves and droughts in the United States over the past 50 years. And the data indicates that U.S. extremes of heat and dryness are self-intensifying, meaning more heat causes more drought and vice versa, which causes more fires. And finally, some major good news.
By 2035, in the next 15 years, we will eliminate in the state of California the sales of internal combustion engines.
California's Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom, citing costly pollution and climate impacts like the mega fires that have raged across the state this year, signed an executive order on Wednesday directing state regulators to require new cars sold in the state to be electric or otherwise zero emissions within 15 years.
We are setting a new marker. We're advancing the cause to once again lead not only this nation, but in many respects lead the world in terms of establishing a framework where we can accelerate innovation, we can accelerate adaptation and adoption, and we can in turn grow the economic pie here in the state of California.
And in doing so, he says, the state will generate jobs in building out a clean, reliable electric grid for the state and installing a statewide electric vehicle charging network.
All electric cars in California by 2035?
That's the idea.
Now that's big news. Thank you, Desi Doyen. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, congratulations, we have done it. The globe has surpassed 1 million dead from the coronavirus, and we as Americans, we've led the way. That's right, we are number one. More than 204,000 Americans have died from the coronavirus. Brazil, second at about 141,000. So we're way ahead of everybody else. I guess the way we should be, America. Scary, scary stuff. And yet we still got Florida going to swing the doors wide open. Go on. Everything's the way it should be. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
So we've, as a globe, surpassed 1 million people dead from this, and yet you got places like Florida going, not a big deal.
Yeah, well, I think, too, that people will come back. I hear it every day of what is the death rate, how much is it globally with a million people divided into 7.5 billion. Or 2 billion. I hear it every day. People go to the death rate versus the spreading of the disease.
Yeah. Now, the thing that gets me is, we've got an administration, though, that, doesn't seem to be, had we taken this seriously from the beginning, and now we find out that they knew all along and made the choices they made on purpose, maybe we wouldn't be in this position.
I think if everything had acted a lot earlier, also the question of do you try to look at this from a national basis versus each state doing, a piece of the puzzle, of how they do it, and another state does it differently, and you've just got this patchwork of 50 different approaches.
Yeah, and you've got, the CDC, who I got to be honest, at this point, judging from all of the craziness and all of the, the back and forth, I don't know I don't think we know who to believe at this moment. In fact, there was a story the other day that the director of the CDC, this Robert Redfield, he said on a plane for everybody to hear that he doesn't trust the guy that Trump is, making one of his top advisors on this coronavirus task force, this Dr. Scott Atlas. And basically he came out, he said, look, everything the guy believes, everything he says is false. And the new, NBC News, confirmed it. How do you go forward in an environment where who do you believe?
Oh, it's true. I mean, I don't know what to believe. First you wipe things down, then you don't wipe things down. The CDC says one thing. I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard Dr. Fauci in weeks. Have you? Nothing.
No, they've done a nice job of sequestering him, and now we find out that Dr. Birx claims to be under stress, and she's ready to head for the hills. So again, it's scary stuff, and we're heading into what was from the beginning going to be the most dangerous period throughout this whole thing, and that's the next couple of months.
Right, and then different patchwork of school policies, and one school is doing one thing, and next door they're not doing the same thing, and then people are angry about that. I mean, it's just there's no standard approach to the thing at all.
It's crazy. Let's get to the big story: the tax returns. Thoughts on the tax returns? Are you uncomfortable with the fact that they were leaked? I'm a little uncomfortable with that because it could be anybody's. But the other side of it is, one, I think we have a right to know. On the other side of that, there's really nothing in there we didn't already know.
Well, it points out a bigger picture. I think, overall, I was shocked. I honestly thought, he paid $20,000. Really, I was shocked. But then again, it points out a bigger picture, and I don't know how the audit will turn out. But if I'm correct, I think Amazon pays nothing. I did a podcast with an attorney that loves to put the list together of who pays nothing in America. And so on a bigger note, this is happening all over the place. You pay, I pay, the listeners pay. But, the big boys don't pay. A lot of them don't. And it's unbelievable. So on that note, I think, if anything, let's remember that so many people get away with this. I think making suspect to me, first of all, is it true? Yeah, most likely it is. But what's suspect is probably the New York Times probably had this. I don't think they just, automatically, here it was handed to us, and it's just enough time, happens to be the day before the debate we put it out. It makes it suspect. So if they did have this and they had it 5 months ago, I think they should have put it out 5 months ago, personally. I think they should have. So the timing makes it suspect. Will it change some votes? It may change a few, but overall, my first thought is, how do I do that? How do I, stop paying anything.
No, and it's not. It's even worse than that. I mean, there are hundreds of companies that don't pay any taxes, but there are some that we actually pay beyond. They get a bigger refund. They get like an EITC check for corporate welfare that we pay them to exist. And again, the whole, and this is where I went into at the beginning, our whole tax code is upside down. And for me, it all goes back to, Reagan and the supply side voodoo Reaganomic mentality that said, if we give the rich people and the corporations all the money, it's going to magically trickle down on us like rivers in gold and honey. And it's been rivers of gold. It's just, the kind that are supposed to be on the tape of Donald Trump.
Well, like I said, with Trump, this is going to continue to, by the way, every week more will leak out from the New York Times. And in the end, as much as it's terrible that he paid $750, in the end, though, you've got to look at the policies. What's he going to do policy-wise? What's Joe Biden going to do policy-wise? Or otherwise, if some other paper comes out with something on Biden and it becomes Biden did this on a personal level and Trump did that, so which one do you want to pick? I think it's got to be a policy thing. But on the biggest picture on this, Netflix, if I remember right, Amazon, Chevron, Delta, IBM, I can go on and on, paid no taxes.
Yep. Occidental Petroleum, Honeywell. We can go down. There's a list of like 300 companies that have an effective tax rate of zero or negative numbers.
Right. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. And so I hope if anything comes out of it that, the code changes.
Yeah, and this is something for me, this is what I've been screaming about the whole time. I never believed there was going to be a smoking gun with Russia in the tax returns because not even the shady tax attorney would allow that to go in. For me, it was always about the conversation about the rate that they pay, the deductions that they abuse, and we find out, one of my favorite, we paid the daughter $750,000 in consulting fees. How do I do that? I got 3 kids. Can I make them consultants and pay their college fee out of that?
Right, exactly.
It's just insane. But, immediately I got a bunch of conservatives going, this is illegal. You should be angry. And I'm going, I got to be honest. I think if you're running for president, this should have been vetted from the beginning, because there is the important part of the fact that he's hundreds of millions of dollars in debt, and that debt is coming due, and we have no idea who he's in debt to.
Right. Correct.
It's crazy. Do you think this will come up in the big debate?
Oh, yes. I think it's going to be probably the first question out of the box.
Are we expecting, what kind of fireworks are we expecting? Or do you think this will be kind of subdued? Because Trump keeps trying to lower the bar, it seems.
He is lowering the bar on it. They'll attempt to get Biden, angry. I think Biden's best interest is not to go in like a gladiator, keep his cool, try to keep to issues as much as humanly possible. But yes, the Trump campaign has dumbed this down.
Yeah.
They're not putting the bar high. I think they're just trying to convince him that this is the real deal. You just can't go in like you did 4 years ago and, accuse people's parents of killing Kennedy and things like that.
That would be a little tough. Yeah.
I'll never get over that one, Rick, of all of them. I'm sorry. That was the top of the food chain.
That was right there. And that should have been one of those moments where the country collectively went, next.
Well, it allowed me on radio to say he's going to get elected, and then most of the radio hosts, you didn't do this, but most of them were like, well, how could you say that? And I said, well, because Hillary didn't go up 15 points. The more he said things, she didn't budge.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you're like, okay, something's going on.
Yeah, if I'm advising Biden, there's got to be a moment in the debate where Biden just turns to him and goes, no, keep going. I'll give him my time. Right. Just keep going.
Right. Something, not a vicious shark attack level, but something that makes fun of him or, brushes him aside. That's the best thing Biden could do.
Yeah, I'm right there. And the more that he can do that, the better. I mean, because I had this conversation with a guy yesterday, and I was like, for me, if I'm up there and he starts on a ramble, and this incoherent nonsense that he does on these fantasy tours he does, I just say, by all means, let him have my time. You keep digging there, buddy.
Right. exactly.
Now, as we talked about the last time, National Guard's been called out in Cleveland, as I understand.
Yes, and I think that DeWine has done that. I mean, I'm not like alarmed over this. I think DeWine's done it because they don't want, some kind of major brouhaha on the streets, which we hope doesn't happen. It'll take away from, the debate. So I think he's done it as a preemptive thing. DeWine's really not the type to try to, just get things stirred up.
Right.
And I think it's more of a preemptive thing.
ACB, evidently we're now calling her ACB instead of Amy Coney Barrett. In fact, in kind of a backward slap, they're now selling notorious ACB shirts. And for a minute, I had to go, what the hell is ACB? Until
like AOC, ACB.
Well, RBG. The thing was Notorious RBG for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now they're trying to make her the new, the anti-Ginsburg, which sadly she's going to be. She's the antithesis of everything Ruth Bader Ginsburg stood for. And as one person told me, Barrett's going to walk through all the doors that Ginsburg opened for her and then slam them behind her.
Right. One of my Facebook friends was saying the same thing. One thing on this, I think that that the Democratic side has to watch. I mean, it's going to happen, and they should put up the good fight. But for example, there was it wasn't a Democrat quote citizen, but there was a Democrat activist who had said something about the adoption, of the two kids,
the kids from Haiti.
Right, and then she has 7 children. One of the children has Down syndrome,
right.
And I think that there's a bit of a box in here for the Democratic side, in the sense that if she performs well, forget the issues for a second, and I know that sounds horrible, but if she performs well, the Democratic side is going to have to watch how they go after her, and they've got to watch anything like the one wasn't Democrat National Committee person, but one of the activists. Watch what you say on the adoption and the kids, and it could be used as a sympathy, personal sympathy, versus the issues of how she will vote on the court.
And they're going to make her religion part of this, but you can't make religion the focus of it.
There you go, and that's the thing. It's Catholic, and you sure don't want to have that one laid out all over the table debating about Catholics right now. So I think they have to be, they have to focus on exactly where she would be on health care and the Affordable Care Act and reproductive rights, etc. And they have to focus very spotlight narrowly on there. Speaking of spotlights, let Senator Kamala Harris and let her shine on the committee. And you know why I say let her? I've served on committees, not one of the note of judiciary in the Senate, but I've served on House committees, and boy, everybody wants their time in front of the camera.
Yep.
It wouldn't hurt a couple of people to yield to Senator Harris.
No, absolutely. I had said that, I would let her exclusively do the interrogating because you don't want it to be the man-woman thing either. But you want to stick to those issues, like you said. Stick to reproductive rights. Stick to affirmative action, and civil rights. Health care, huge. Make this about what the vision of the country that she's going to shape is going to look like. Because I've been saying, from a workers' rights perspective, we're going to be going back to the days of Lochner, where if you were, desperate enough and hungry enough to work in poverty conditions for desperation wages, that was your liberty, buddy. But we're going right back to those days.
Right.
And I think this is an education process. I think you're spot on. There's no stopping this. So what you've got to use it for, I think, is to educate people of what the world is going to look like in a 6-3 world.
Right, and it's got to be done carefully. Don't make it about religion, narrow it to where she will be on these things. And the other thing is, I'm not sure it benefits for this to turn into a 24/7 media cycle on her, and then it comes to conclusion, she gets appointed, and a lot of the campaign messages, for the Senate races and the presidency are lost. So, yes, they've got to fight the good fight, but they've got to be careful how they do it.
Yeah, because there isn't a lot of time. Now, I saw an interesting story. Sarah Palin's back in the news.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, she evidently she's threatening Lisa Murkowski to do the right thing. She says that so you should walk back. We'll forgive you. If you can't do that, remember my house. I can see a lot of things from my house, she said, Lisa. I can see 2020 from her house, which I thought was pretty funny. I mean, she's taken the I can see Russia thing from, to good heart. Evidently, not only can she see Russia, she can see the future. But this isn't a veiled. This is an outright threat to Murkowski. Vote in line, or I'm coming after you.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I haven't actually heard anything about Sarah Palin for a long time.
And thank goodness.
Nothing. I mean, used to be she was kind of the darling of the circuit, but I haven't heard anything. It's the first bit.
Yeah, she went a little kooky. I mean, she was doing that whole Glenn Beck TV thing, and then she went off her own. And I think a lot of people felt like they got cheated because it wasn't very good.
Mm-hmm. For a while, she was, looked at, listened to, et cetera, and then she kind of evaporated.
Yeah. Last question. After tomorrow's debate, do you think there'll be a second one?
Yes. I think there'll be a total of 3.
I know they're scheduling 3. I'm wondering if there will be a second.
I think so, unless the two of them cross over to each other and start shoving each other around on stage, which would be interesting, to be honest with you. I mean, it really would. I hate to admit it, but it'd be kind of cool. That would honestly, after 2016, the debates, everything said, after everything that's happened, after the killer dragon hornets and coronavirus, this would just top it.
That would be it.
Would top it off.
Seeing Biden roll up his sleeve. All right, old man, bring it on.
Yeah, and Saturday Night Live would go wild for about 6 months on it.
That would be great.
Right.
But as always, Bob, I appreciate the time, man. Good
Rick.
stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney. I want to see it. I want to see the rumble in the jungle there. Quick break. Right back.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Would you be willing to stand up in solidarity with your fellow workers, even if it cost you your job? Well, on this day in labor history, the workers at Mersey Docks and Harbour Company in Liverpool, England, answered that question. The year was 1995. 329 Mersey dock workers refused to cross a picket line that was being walked against another company on the docks. The workers at Torside had been fired for protesting against erosions in job security and increasingly unpredictable scheduling. They were speaking out against the casualization of their labor. When the Mersey dock workers would not cross the Torside picket line, they too were fired. Dock workers across the world stood up in solidarity with the Mersey workers against this unjust treatment. They knew if it could happen in Liverpool, it might happen anywhere. Pickets sprung up from Norway to Japan, from Australia to Italy, and into the United States. It was a global outpouring of solidarity. The strike wore on for 850 days. 1 year into the strike, dock workers held an international day of action in support of the Liverpool workers. Finally, 2.5 years after they were fired, the dock workers agreed to a settlement. They did not get their jobs back, but they did get severance pay. A film was made about the struggle. The proceeds were used to purchase a bar in Liverpool. It is known as the Dockers Pub and has become a space for working class organizing. The International Dock Workers Council was also born from this strike. Today, the council has 90,000 members, a lasting movement of solidarity. 20 years after the strike, dock workers from across the world gathered in Liverpool to remember the struggle. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So to wrap today up, we're taking off tomorrow for the debates. I want to watch those live. Back on Wednesday to talk about the outcome. We'll be doing some live tweeting and some discussion around the debates. So make sure you check in on our Twitter page. But I thought I'd finish up today on a screw YouTube note. Yes, I know they're probably going to block me now. But YouTube, evidently, on Deaf Awareness Week, they decided to kill the crowdsourced captions that were on videos there. And you go, what's the point? Now, I guess, it's a Google-owned platform, and it was pulled because I guess it was rarely used or whatever their argument was, or, people report spam or whatever. But hey, nothing says we care about the deaf more than we're going to take away one of the only things that helps them. Sad, sad stuff. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.